My wife secretly borrowed $300, $0 from her boss, then married me and forged a will to inherit everything. Now she's claiming I schemed to steal her inheritance, and we're headed for a brutal courtroom battle over millions. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story about betrayal like this, but here I am. It all started with what seemed like a normal life, married to Lisa for 5 years. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued, and always had a way of making me feel like I was the luckiest guy alive. We had a decent apartment, good jobs, and I thought we were building a future. But then, out of nowhere, everything changed. It started with small things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her being unusually secretive about her emails, and her suddenly insisting on her own privacy. She'd brush it off when I asked, saying I was being paranoid or that I was reading too much into it. I trusted her, I really did, but I'd catch her in little lies. Like once I saw a suspicious credit card charge on her statement, something for a hotel downtown that I knew she hadn't mentioned. When I asked her about it, she said it was a business thing she was working on that she needed to keep it quiet. That struck me as odd, but I let it go because I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Then came the biggest sign that something was off. I found a text message on her phone from her boss, Mark, that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Don't forget the plan." I remember feeling my stomach drop. I looked through her phone history and there were more messages, flirty, suggestive, intimate. She was clearly hiding something. I confronted her one night after she came home late, smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, her eyes darting around like she was trying to hide something. When I pressed her, she got defensive, told me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I knew better. I knew she was lying. The way she avoided eye contact, the way her hands trembled just slightly when I looked at her, it all pointed to guilt. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could the woman I loved so much be cheating on me? And not just cheating, she was sneaking around with her boss, Mark. That was the moment I realized everything I thought I knew about her was a lie. What made it worse was that I had no concrete proof, just enough suspicion to make my stomach churn. I started digging more, going through her emails, her social media accounts, even her bank statements. And that's when I stumbled on something that made my blood run cold. A series of bank transfers, large sums of money, and a forged will. It turned out Lisa had borrowed $300, $0 from Mark, her boss, without telling me. She was planning to marry me, but her real plan was to inherit everything from her father. She'd forged a will to make sure she'd get it all. She was planning to cut me out completely and run away with Mark once she had her hands on the money. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just the affair anymore. It was the fact that she'd been lying, cheating, and scheming behind my back for months. I felt like I'd been played for a fool. That night, I sat alone in our apartment, feeling numb and furious at the same time. How could she do this? How could she betray me so completely? I was furious at Mark too. How could he have been so manipulative? But mostly I was furious at Lisa for lying to my face all this time. I thought I knew her, but I was wrong. She was a different person entirely, and I had no idea how to process it all. The next day I couldn't even look at her the same way. Everything felt like a lie, her smile, her touch, the way she used to say she loved me. It was all hollow now. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure how to start. Part of me wanted to just scream at her, to call her out in front of everyone, but I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed facts, clarity, some kind of explanation, though I already suspected what she'd say. That evening I sat her down in the living room. The air was thick with tension. She was acting normal, too normal, like she didn't realize the storm I was about to unleash. I looked her right in the eyes and told her I knew everything. About her affair, the money, the forged will. Her plans to screw me over. Her face flickered, defense, guilt, maybe even a little surprise that I'd caught her so quickly. She started with her usual lies. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "It's none of your business." She tried to brush it off, claiming Mark was just a friend, that the money was for a project she was working on, that the will was just a backup plan in case her father died unexpectedly. But I wasn't buying it. I had all the evidence. I had her texts, her bank statements, the forged documents. When I pressed her harder, her facade cracked. She snapped at me, calling me paranoid, saying I was jealous, insecure, ridiculous. She told me I was imagining things, that she loved me and would never do anything to hurt me. But I knew better. I saw the way her eyes darted around, the way she tried to change the subject every time I mentioned Mark or the money. It was clear she was trying to manipulate me, to make me doubt myself. That's when I felt something inside me shift. The anger, the hurt, it all boiled over. I realized I'd been a fool for trusting her. I thought about all the moments we shared, the plans we made, the future I envisioned, gone in an instant. I told her I wanted her out of the house, that I needed space to think. She screamed, called me crazy, said I was ruining everything. But I didn't care. I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. That night I stayed up late, going over everything again. The betrayal was worse than I could have imagined, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all these signs? How did I not see that the woman I loved was capable of such deception? I felt a mix of sadness, anger, and deep disappointment. I'd lost my wife, my partner, and maybe even my trust in people in general. I knew my life was about to change forever. I had to decide whether to fight for this marriage or cut my losses and walk away. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just a fling or a simple mistake. It was a carefully planned betrayal, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without a fight. I wanted justice, and I knew I'd have to be prepared for whatever came next. That's when I started planning my next move, because revenge, I realized, wasn't just about hurting her. It was about making her see that she couldn't cheat and lie her way out of what she'd done. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos and clarity. I knew I had to gather every piece of evidence I could find, not just to confront her again, but to prepare for what I knew would be an ugly battle ahead. I started by digging deeper into her financials, bank accounts, emails, and even her phone records. I needed to understand exactly how far she'd gone, how much she'd planned, and what her next move might be. One night I found a series of encrypted emails on her laptop, conversations with Mark about the legal documents, the will, and transferring money. She was meticulous, almost obsessed with covering her tracks, but I caught enough to see her scheming. I also discovered that she'd used a fake identity to open a separate bank account under a different name, funneling the borrowed money into it. It was clear she was planning to disappear once she had the inheritance, and she'd even gone as far as drafting a fake will, one that would make her the sole heir, cutting me out completely. I knew I had to act fast. My mind was racing. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was about her stealing my life, my future. I remembered her bitchy attitude, how she'd always belittle me when things didn't go her way, and I realized she'd been manipulating everyone around her, including her own family, to get what she wanted. She'd always been good at lying, twisting facts, and making herself look innocent. But now I had all the proof I needed. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I sat her down again, this time with printed copies of the emails, bank statements, and the forged will. She looked stunned, almost scared. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she tried to play it cool, denying everything, saying I was jealous, insecure, that I was ruining her life. She insisted she loved me, that she'd never cheat or steal from me. But her words rang hollow, and I knew better. I knew her game. I told her I was done playing her games, that I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I warned her that I was going to go to the authorities, that I had enough evidence to expose her and her schemes. Her face twisted with anger and desperation, and she screamed at me that I was ruining everything, that I'd never get a dime from her or her inheritance. She claimed I was scheming behind her back, trying to steal her money, and that I was just jealous because she was smarter and more successful than me. That was the moment I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even as a person I once loved. She was a liar, a manipulator, and a thief. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a strange sense of relief. I'd finally seen her true face. I told her she needed to leave that night, that I wasn't going to keep her under my roof while she plotted her escape. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the evidence I'd collected. That night I sat in silence, trying to process everything. I felt hurt, furious, and betrayed all at once, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had been blind for too long, that I'd been living with a lie. Deep down, I knew that this wasn't just about her affair or the money. It was about her complete lack of integrity, her willingness to destroy everything we'd built just to get what she wanted. Now I had a choice. I could fight her in court, expose her for the fraud and betrayal she was, or I could try to move on and rebuild my life. The truth was, I didn't want to be with someone who'd lie, cheat, and steal from me. But I also knew that taking her to court wouldn't be easy. It would be messy, expensive, and emotionally draining. Still, I was determined to see this through. She pushed me to the edge, and I wasn't going to back down now. I was ready to fight for what was mine, my dignity, my life, and the truth. Over the next couple of weeks, I threw myself into gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I hired a lawyer, one who specialized in financial crimes and fraud, and started preparing for what I knew would be a brutal legal battle. I also reached out to a private investigator I knew from years back, just to make sure I had every angle covered. The last thing I wanted was to be caught off guard when the fight truly began. Meanwhile, Lisa was trying to spin her story. She played the victim, crying and claiming I was jealous and paranoid, saying I was trying to ruin her reputation. She insisted that her relationship with Mark was purely professional, that the money she borrowed was a loan for her business project, and that the forged will was just a what-if scenario she'd never intended to use. She even accused me of trying to manipulate her, which made me laugh bitterly. She'd lied so much she didn't even know what was real anymore. But I had her texts, her emails, her bank statements, the fake will, everything. I had her own words, her own signatures, her plans laid out in black and white. I knew she'd planned this long before I ever suspected a thing. The more she tried to deny it, the more I realized how deep her deception ran. It was like peeling back layers of a rotten onion. I couldn't believe I'd been married to this woman for 5 years, years I'd thought were filled with love and trust. One night, I finally decided to confront her again, but this time with everything laid out on the table. I called her and told her I knew about her scheme, that I had proof, and that I was going to take her to court. Her reaction was a mix of anger and panic. She yelled at me, calling me every name in the book: crazy, paranoid, a loser. She said I was trying to ruin her life because I was jealous of her success. That's when I realized she was completely deluded. She truly believed she could get away with it all. I told her I was done playing her games, that I was going to expose her for what she was: a liar, a thief, a manipulator. I wasn't going to let her get away with stealing my life, my money, and my future. I made it clear I was going to fight her in court, and I warned her that I had enough evidence to take everything she tried to hide and turn it against her. Her face twisted. In rage, she kept insisting she loved me, that I was overreacting, that everything would be fine. She threw a tantrum, claiming I was just jealous because she was smarter, more successful, and that I'd never be able to take her down. But I knew better. I knew she'd lied to me from day one, and I was finally ready to make her pay for it. The turning point came when I decided to file a lawsuit against her. I wanted full disclosure of her finances, the fake will, everything. I wanted her to answer for her lies. I also warned her that I was going to go after Mark, too, for his part in the scheme. The idea of her losing everything, her money, her reputation, her freedom, made her even more furious. She tried to threaten me, saying I'd regret this, that she'd ruin me if I kept going. But I was past caring about her threats. I knew I had the truth on my side, and I was prepared to fight to the bitter end. In the meantime, I kept my distance. No more late nights, no more excuses. I moved my things into a temporary place, trying to separate myself emotionally from her chaos. It hurt, God, it hurt, but I knew I had to do this. I had to stand up for myself, for what was right, and deep down I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I was finally in control of my life again. I was determined to see this through, no matter how ugly it got. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I wasn't going to let her win. Not without a fight. The court date was set about a month after I filed the lawsuit. The entire process was exhausting: meetings with lawyers, endless piles of paperwork, and constant stress. Every day, I woke up feeling like I was walking a tightrope, unsure if I'd fall or get the justice I desperately wanted. Lisa, of course, was trying to spin her story in court, claiming I was the one scheming, that I was jealous of her success and trying to sabotage her. She played her victim card hard, sobbing during her testimonies, insisting she only borrowed the money to help her father, that the forged will was just a backup plan she never intended to use. But I had everything on my side. Her emails, her bank transfers, the forged documents, all pointing directly to her deception. I had hired a forensic accountant to trace the money, and his report confirmed that Lisa had illegally borrowed the $300, $0 from Mark, then used that money to fund her fake will and her plan to inherit her father's estate. The lawyer presented all of this evidence in court, and I watched her face turn pale as the truth was laid bare. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that I was trying to manipulate the system, that I was just bitter and jealous, that she was the real victim here. But it was all hollow. The judge listened carefully, reviewing the evidence, and I could see the wheels turning. Deep down, I knew this was going to be a decisive moment. The judge asked her directly about the forged will, about the money, about her relationship with Mark. She kept insisting she was innocent, that it was all a misunderstanding, that she loved me and never meant to hurt me. But I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I stood up, looked directly at her, and told the court everything I knew: the affair, the money, the forged documents, her manipulative tactics. I explained how she'd planned this long before I ever suspected a thing, how she'd used her charm and her bitchy attitude to hide her true intentions. I told them she'd lied to her own family, to her boss, and to me. I laid it all out, knowing that this was the moment her would crack. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, it was clear. He ordered her to return the borrowed money, to pay damages for the fraud, and to give full disclosure of her assets. He also declared the forged will invalid and ordered her to pay court costs. Lisa sat there, stunned, her face a mixture of rage and disbelief. She tried to argue, to plead, but it was no use. The evidence was overwhelming. At that moment, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. I'd lost my wife, my trust, and my sense of security. I realized that the Lisa I'd loved was gone, replaced by someone who was willing to lie, cheat, and steal her way to what she wanted. It hurt deeply, but I also knew I had to move on. I couldn't keep living in the past, clinging to what was lost. In the days that followed, I started the process of rebuilding my life. I filed for divorce, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I knew I deserved better, someone honest, someone who wouldn't betray me for money or power. I cut all contact with Lisa, refusing to let her manipulate me anymore. The court case drained me emotionally, but it also gave me clarity. I understood now that trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep, but survival means knowing when to fight and when to let go. Looking back, I realize I learned some hard lessons. Never ignore the small signs, because they often point to bigger problems. Trust is earned, not given blindly. And most importantly, you have to stand up for yourself, even when it feels like the world is crashing down around you. I don't regret fighting for the truth, because in the end, honesty and integrity matter most. And I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar knows that even in betrayal, there's a way forward, sometimes through the courtroom, sometimes through letting go. But always you have to stay true to yourself. After everything was settled, after the court had handed down its judgment, after Lisa was forced to pay restitution and her schemes were exposed, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The house was quiet now, no more lies echoing through the walls, no more pretenses. I moved out of the apartment, not because I wanted to abandon everything, but because I needed space to heal. The betrayal had torn me apart, but somehow I was beginning to piece myself back together. The hardest part wasn't the legal battles or the financial loss, it was the emotional scars. I'd trusted someone I loved with my whole life, only to find she'd been plotting behind my back for months. That realization changed me. It made me more cautious, more guarded, but it also made me appreciate the importance of honesty and integrity. I learned that some people wear masks so well you don't see their true face until it's too late. Over the following months, I focused on myself. I started therapy, talking through the betrayal and learning to forgive, not necessarily her, but myself for trusting too easily. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy. Every day was a challenge, but I refused to let her define my future. Slowly, I regained my confidence and rediscovered my own strength. Looking back, I realized that the betrayal taught me more about human nature than I ever wanted to know. People can be manipulative, greedy, and utterly ruthless when they think they can get away with it. But I also learned that, in the end, truth and justice can prevail if you're willing to fight for them. I don't regret standing my ground. I don't regret exposing her lies, even if it cost me my marriage. Because deep down, I knew I deserved honesty and respect, and I refused to settle for anything less. To anyone reading this who might be facing a similar betrayal, whether it's infidelity, financial deception, or both, know that you're not alone. It's one of the most painful experiences you can go through, but it's also an opportunity to what truly matters. Trust is fragile, yes, but your integrity and self-worth are even more valuable. Don't be afraid to stand up, seek the truth, and take back control of your life, because no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way forward. Sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth, and in the end I found my strength again, and I know you can too.